Modern education is premised strongly on materialistic values. It is vital that when educating our children's brains, that we do not neglect to educate their hearts, a key element of which has to be the nurturing of our compassionate nature. That's a quote from the Dalai Lama about modern education.
Nice, and that is the subject of today's episode, which is the fourth and final of our Modern Times series. In each episode so far, we've kind of pointed out some flaws or some unique phenomena to what we consider to be modernity, which is generally just post-industrialization and the internet age. So we've gone from conspiracy theories to the rise of the far right to modern art, and now we're capping it off with modern education, which is very fitting because it's kind of the premise for the other four, definitely, and generally just everything we do with this podcast, which is, I guess, at its heart, an educational podcast.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like the Modern Times series could basically just be our podcast. Everything kind of relates to post-industrialization, but it was good to focus on it for a few episodes.
Yeah, so for education, we've each done some research. It was already a topic of interest for both of us, especially Alicia. So we've each done our research and made some hypotheses and had some ideas, hopefully, which we can collide on air and figure out what exactly is wrong with our education system, if anything is. So do you want to start us off, Alicia?
Yeah, so I started by doing some research about the history of the education system in the Western world. And basically, since its conception, it hasn't changed. But I'm just going to go through kind of traditionally or historically how children learned. So from basically the beginning of time until about 100,000 years ago, children learned. They were hunters and gatherers. They learned through play, and they were encouraged and basically given free rein on exploring their surroundings and learning lessons through experiences. But back then there wasn't science and math and everything for them to learn. It wasn't as crucial for their survival as it is now, because if you don't know how to read and write, or if you don't understand basic science, it's hard to get a career. So that was the beginning of time. Children didn't go to school. There was really little formal education unless it was in the church, or if they were, apprenticing with a philosopher or a mystic. So after the hunters and gatherers, mankind started to evolve, and they started learning how to do agriculture. So there were farms, and there was more physical labor to be done in order to reap food, which was a more reliable source of food. So it was good for humanity, but children were now expected to work, and their sense of play and wildness slowly became more and more suppressed. And then in the Middle Ages, it got really intense and feudalism started to arise. So there was now a really strict hierarchy. So there was like the lords who owned the land, and then it just went all the way down to the servants, and children were often mixed in with the servants because they were basically free labor. And at the time, if a child basically gave in to their instinct to play, they could be killed. It was just a very dangerous thing to be wild. So that was kind of the beginning of trying to tame children, and they would often use formal education to try and make kids more tame.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then the Industrial Revolution happened, and kids started working in factories. And now they weren't even outside all day, they were inside. And then in the 16th century in Europe, formal education was instituted to try and basically allow children a safe space again where they could be nurtured. And in the 19th century, child labor was officially started to be restricted. People under 9 weren't allowed to work, and then their work weeks were limited to 60 hours. And the rest had to be school. So it's kind of the history of children's formative years. So it went from just complete wildness to really tamed working in factories, and then to schools. And schools really started to take hold with the Protestant Revolution, when the church was making claims that you had to be really, by knowing the scriptures, you'd be closer to God, and that's how you'd be saved, basically. And so for the 19th and 20th century, pretty much all schools across Europe and North America were run by the church. And I have here, there's some when schools like became official in the United States, there were a bunch of different groups that were saying this is what schools are for. So I'm just going to kind of read them off, and this is still basically the case today, so it hasn't changed in the last 150 years. So business people saw schooling as a way to create better workers, which is basically still the case. National leaders saw schooling as a means of creating good patriots and future soldiers. To them, the crucial lessons were about the glories of the fatherland, the wondrous achievements and more moral virtues of the nation's founders and leaders. Still is kind of the case in schools. They talk about, especially in the United States, and I imagine a lot of Europe, they just teach their history. I don't know for sure, but in Canada, we just learn American history.
Every country does that.
And then religious leaders just saw school as a way to teach students about scripture. And then over time, as like more fields of study kind of arose and science became more prevalent, there began to be more like these distinct subjects that we have today. But really the classroom has never changed. It's just always been a place for taming children, making the distinction between work and play. Yeah.
Thanks for that
history.
Thanks for that brief history of childhood from the dawn of humanity to now.
No problem.
Okay, so I think a good place to start is you were mentioning the different professions and what they saw school as beneficial for and who they wanted school to create, what kinds of adults.
Yeah.
So you said that the politicians wanted to create patriots and soldiers, and the religious leaders wanted to create good religious followers, etc. A good place to start is probably, what should school be creating? What kind of adults? What should be the goal of early education?
I think it should be creating competent adults. People who feel empowered to make decisions for themselves. They're informed about the basic aspects of life that you just need to be taught, such as how to live a healthy life, how to do your taxes nowadays, things like that.
Really?
Yeah, but I think it should be mainly a place for socialization and facilitating personal growth and curiosity. What do you think?
I think making critical thinkers is probably the biggest goal. You want to make humans who can think for themselves. Yeah. Otherwise, you're not really doing anything for the kids or to kind of further society.
Yeah.
I think making them, if you want to talk like tangible things, you need to make informed voters. So, kids need to be aware of civics and history.
Yeah.
You need to help them realize themselves. So there needs to be like a big variety of options.
Yeah.
And one of the questions which I wanted to ask, which I'm surprised that you mentioned so definitively, was on the topic of taxes, finances, cooking, mechanics. Is school the place for those things?
Personally, I don't think so. But I feel like in our society where parents have to work from the time they wake up until they come home and have to make supper for their kids, there isn't too much space for that learning to go on in the home, in the current system.
Yeah.
But if work days were shorter and school days were shorter, which would be two of my suggestions for society, then all of that learning could go on at home.
Work days was shorter and school days was shorter?
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like a wish list of like a grade 4 kid. It's like, no school on Fridays, school days shorter, pizza for lunch.
But short school days in all of the countries that are like held up as really good at education, their school days are just 8 to 12 or 1.
Really? Tell me about some of those, because I know you did some research. I didn't look into those at all.
Mm-hmm. So I mainly just looked at Germany because throughout history they've been leaders in education, so they were the first ones to like do the whole school thing to try and make kids more disciplined, but then since they were so far ahead in the first place, they're now still far ahead. So basically everyone goes to primary school. School doesn't start till you're 7, I believe, like mandatory schooling, but you can go to preschool from 3 to 6 if you want to put your kids in that. And then there's mandatory school for about 4 years, and then teachers and parents collaborate to decide where the kids should go next. And there's 4 different types they can go into. 4 types of schools, and they're mandatory in all communities across Germany. And basically they're just a range of learning speeds, learning styles. Some of them are really hands-on, some of them promote like internships and things.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, after you do those few years of schooling, there's another choice and another choice. And then you graduate and you can go to university if you want to.
So there's more choice throughout.
Yeah.
Whereas in North America, you're really kind of funneled through. I think that's what I was talking about realizing each kid, leaving no child behind, because that works just for, let's say in North American classrooms, I find it's not so nuanced as that. You're either one of the slow kids or one of the fast kids.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about being dumb or smart. It's just about doing the work fast or slow.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of factors which go into that. And I find that the system doesn't benefit kids on either extreme.
No,
It's like the kids who do their work fast are kind of screwed because they just have to sit there and kind of twiddle their thumbs.
Yeah.
And the kids who do their work slow are often kind of bumped along by the speed of the coursework.
Yeah.
And the teachers are unable to help them because, I don't know, classroom size or anything like that.
Yeah. But I think that's why this model seems to be kind of the best option. And again, they only go to school for like 5 hours a day, so there's more time for play, socializing, extracurriculars. And their curriculum is just very well balanced between arts. There's psychology classes, there's philosophy classes, there's global geography classes, like there's everything. Whereas from my schooling experience until grade 11, there was basically science, math. We didn't even have social studies. Like I never learned about anything history, only on my own time.
Yeah. No, that's one of the key things I had written down. So the first thing I noted was that I wanted to talk about was the separation of what is learned at home versus in school, which you kind of skimmed over, and you said, well, this wouldn't be the ideal, but since society is the way it is and parenting is the way it is because of the economy and things like that, school should be the place for teaching life skills.
Yeah.
I think I disagree, to be honest.
Okay.
I think, let's say doing your taxes.
Yeah.
I would just say, Google it. I
That's
genuinely,
true.
like if I was a high school or a middle school student, I would not want a class on that.
Yeah.
Nor would I want a class on cooking, sewing, fixing a car, anything like that. I would just say, I don't know, that's what the internet's for. No?
I don't think so.
Why not?
Kids don't choose to learn those things.
What do you
For
mean?
the most part. Kids, if they're going to go on the internet, they don't want to learn how to sew, they want to just watch a YouTube video.
No, but I mean when your button breaks or when it's tax season.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I always fantasized about having home ec classes and stuff.
We had one.
We didn't.
In my middle school, we had one. We had a wood shop class, which was poor, and we had a cooking class, and we sewed a bit as well, which was equally poor. Not because the topics were bad, you know, those are completely respectable things.
Yeah.
Even honorable, I would say. And not because they were even taught badly, because they weren't in my school, but just because for me I was thinking like, this doesn't make sense. We're
Maybe
taught.
it shouldn't be in high school. Maybe it should be in elementary. Those kinds of skills.
I just think it's home stuff. Cooking, sewing, working with what, construction. That just seems to me like it should be home stuff and school should be more academic, in my opinion.
I just have a really hard time drawing the line between what should be in school and what should be at home, because I just think school should be less academic, because it just doesn't engage students, or it doesn't enable them, it doesn't give them chances to actually apply their critical thinking.
Yeah, but I don't think doing taxes does either, or learning how to do taxes. It just seems very factory line to be teaching kids how to do taxes, car payments, mortgages, phone contracts. It just doesn't seem like the place of school to me. I think they should be teaching more kind of eternal things, more universal things, and not just the kind of nuts and bolts, day-to-day, adult, boring stuff. That just seems like you can figure it out on your own time.
Yeah, I guess.
I think it boils down to this, and I had a really similar conversation with a student in one of my environmental classes in the last school year when we were talking about environmental education. It boils down to kind of just like, I think, a semantics issue with the question itself. When we say what should be taught in school, I think I'm talking about some kind of idealized version of school in like an idealized society where other avenues for education are working as they should. And you're maybe talking pragmatically, as in what should school do now to fill in gaps which aren't being filled elsewhere?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was feeling.
Right, so we have the same thoughts, we're just talking two different questions.
Yeah, because when I was trying to prepare for this episode, I was thinking very ideally, I just feel like parents should technically play a bigger role in children's education than they do, just like much bigger, but it's really not possible in the current system, I think. But in our perfect sustainable world, parents would be teaching their kids how to function.
Yeah, or they can just do it by themselves, because I really think one of the key tenets of education in the modern world, especially, is that you need to teach kids how to think for themselves, how to research, how to find information, how to discern which information is good and true and useful and proper, and even what information to look for, because I find critical thinking is really a skill which I think is on the wane in young kids. And it's not even that maybe they have an issue and don't know how to solve it. Often I think they struggle even with the idea of having an issue, of having a problem. I think kids just kind of flounder these days, which is not good.
No. And that's kind of where we can maybe get into the topic of technology in schools, maybe teaching kids this is how you can use technology. You can use it to learn about arts, and you can learn to use it to learn how to solve your problems by looking up the solution to mending your clothes instead of just throwing them out. You can use technology to look up these things, using it in a bit more of a practical way.
Technology?
Yeah.
Unless in a idealized catch-all substitute for a teacher.
I had a list about like claims that people made about technology in the classroom, why it should be there.
Okay, go for it. Are we just going to debunk each one?
Yes.
All right.
Because I literally laughed when I saw this because it was funny to me. Okay, so the question was, how important is technology in education?
Can you say where you got the list from?
From Pine Cove Consulting.
Oh no.
So here's why technology is important. Students demand it.
I don't care what the students demand. This is, okay, I'm going to sound so much like a right-wing grandpa, but young people today are so entitled.
I know.
And I noticed this in my own school, while I was in the school, while I was young, is students thinking it was some kind of democracy and that they could sometimes like outvote the teacher or like make the decisions.
Let it happen.
And the teachers were very submissive. I think they were neutered by school rules and school boards and stuff like that, but that's another topic.
Yeah.
Okay, this is again going off the deep end a little bit, but I really feel like school should be at least in part about making kids understand a bit of misery, a bit of even boredom, a bit of being told what to do sometimes. I think that change has maybe mirrored the same change in parenting, which is again another conversation.
Yeah.
But I just feel like they go too far to try and make kids always happy and always comfortable and always
satisfied, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think school's a place, as I was saying in the beginning, like to make kids creative and curious, but yeah, they need to learn discipline.
But the point, discipline's a good word. The point,
self-discipline, because you can't go on the internet if you don't have self-discipline.
The point is, kids demand technology. Kids don't know what's right for them. That's why they're in school. So that point is just completely invalid.
Yeah, let me read the description below it, because it just is funny to me. Students are engaging with technology constantly outside of the classroom. Kids like to be interactive, and learning through technology has now become a part of their lifestyle. A little bit of that's true, like it's a part of their life is learning through technology, but kids demand it is not a valid point. And then the next one is just new teachers are demanding it, which is just...
It's the same thing as kids demand it.
It's just like...
Who cares what new teachers have to say? I'm kidding.
Yeah, I think it shouldn't be taught in teachers' college that this is... It's just proven time and time and time again that technology in classrooms isn't effective.
Okay, when we say technology, what do we mean?
I'm thinking note-taking on your laptop mainly, because one of my teachers, apparently before every single one of his classes, he sends out 30 articles about why taking notes on your laptop is just way less effective, because you just get distracted, you distract everyone else, you distract the teacher, you don't have relationships, it's just not good.
I hate it in university. I think it's pathetic that it is allowed. I remember calling her out a little bit. One of our teachers last year in the same class, we were in the same class, was talking about learning accommodations, which is, whatever. But she was talking about in a previous year, she had a student who his learning accommodation was that he had to been intermittently watching NBA games in class
Yeah.
on his laptop. And she was like, if you guys need to do that, that's fine. Just let me know the score. And I was just like, no, that's not fine. This is supposed to be like a university. It's a place for higher education and, learning.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure the justification was that this person had a short attention span, had to refocus, which is totally doable without watching NBA games, in my opinion. You could close your notebook and open it back up if you had to.
I think it's just a joke. They kind of bend over backwards for the students, and that starts in elementary, and the students get very used to it.
Yeah, like letting kids have cell phones in schools, I just don't even think that should be allowed.
I don't focus when kids are browsing Facebook or Amazon in class, which happens all the time, because it's just way too eye-catching, let alone watching an NBA game.
Yeah, like it distracts, like it just literally, no matter how focused on your notebook you are, like you'll get distracted by a screen. Screens are just attractive. They draw your eye. Like that's why they are so prevalent.
Anything else on the list?
Yeah, it's a list of 10. I'll skip over some of the really dumb ones, but we have kids can learn at their own pace, which is just more of an issue with the classroom situation. That if a kid
kids can learn at their own pace online?
Mm-hmm.
No, you can't, because the screen isn't a teacher. So it wouldn't help you any more than, a booklet of work or something.
Exactly. It was like you can go back and review the slides, but it's like you can go back and review your notes at home.
Also, just get quicker. Speed up. Seriously.
Yeah. Okay, this was my favorite one. Technology has the ability to enhance relationships between teachers and the students.
Why? Because they can share memes?
Yeah. Basically, it was like teachers can take on the role of an advisor, a content expert, and a coach. It helps making teaching more fun. Students are able to collaborate with their own classmates through technological applications.
Why not just do it?
Just talk
in
to
class.
them. Like that's why you're in school. That's why I think it's beneficial to go to school, because you get to socialize.
Okay, let's make some disclaimers. We know it's Corona time and quarantine and all the schools are cancelled, so we're not talking about those times. We're talking about regular times.
Yeah.
Another disclaimer is that, as we'll get into probably immediately after this list, when we say technology, we're not swearing off all technology. We're saying the current implementation of smart boards in class, which are these big, basically electronic whiteboards, which are pointless, and kids having tablets at their desks or laptops, and those things being mandatory. Basically, the kind of unnatural splicing of modern technology into what Alicia described as a 150-year-old classroom.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about, and that's what we're saying is a silly integration. Exactly.
And like some of the other claims are that it keeps kids engaged. It's just like, no, it doesn't.
That's just basically untrue.
Yeah. Testing's online, and that you need to know how to use technology in order to get a job. And it's like, they don't teach you that. Like, if they were doing like coding maybe or something like that.
Yes.
But that's not what they do.
It already made the point that it's already a part of kids' life.
Yeah.
So school is not teaching kids how to use technology.
No, school didn't teach me how to use Microsoft Word or PowerPoint. Like I just
actually, you did take a class in those things.
Don't talk to me about that class. That was a required course in my university degree to take literally a Microsoft Office course. We had to make PowerPoints and submit them. We had to make zip files and like unzip them.
Did it help you?
No.
Did it help you?
No.
Did it help you?
No. But the thing is, I guess I have a tendency to try and use Microsoft Words in ways it's never been used before to make graphics that move and stuff. So maybe that's just me, but I think every kid loves going on Microsoft Paint. Like, they just explore the applications and know how to use them. It's just a part of their life. I don't think it needs to be, I don't know, just teaching kids how to properly use technology seems good, but just that's not what's being done. Teachers pull up a YouTube video and ask the kids how to open it, and it's just like, that's not teaching the kids anything.
The amount of my high school that was spent watching YouTube videos was kind of gross in hindsight. Yeah. And not me watching YouTube videos outside of class, which was an issue. But the amount that was kind of substituting what had traditionally been provided by a teacher, it was bizarre, and it always made me feel like I didn't need to be there, which is, okay, let's start with that question. Kids have all the content available online now. Why do they need to go to school?
As it is right now, they don't.
That's exactly the point. if you're gonna just use technology and
just become a lazy teacher.
And just to become, I wouldn't say lazy, because teachers are probably still doing about as much work.
No, teachers still do a ton, but it's just like...
If you're going to use technology just to replace yourself as a teacher and just to replace your role in the classroom, the kids don't need to actually be there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I found even with university courses. Because, okay, our courses for next semester have just been announced that they're going to be online.
Yeah.
Which is incredibly disappointing.
Yeah.
I mean, we understand why with Corona and everything, but for us as students, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And it sucks, and we will learn nowhere near as well, because the semester will basically go now that the teachers will just record themselves saying the lectures and upload them. That will be the semester.
Yeah.
And, you know, we'll pay the same tuition.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes you think, why isn't every class like that then, if that's how you can learn the exact same content?
Mm-hmm. And I've taken in-person classes where I haven't had to go to any lectures because they're all online, and I've done excellent in all the classes. But it's just like that's not what education is about to me. It's not about learning the content. You can do that by reading a book. That's not why I went to university. I could have read a business book and a sustainability book and learned the same amount, but it was the experience, the relationships, it was just the experience, and like asking questions, talking to your neighbor about their passions. Like,
well, that's how you learn.
It's how you learn. It's how you actually learn.
Another thing is, we've talked about it, reading in print versus reading on the screen. There's a huge difference. You basically couldn't pay me to read a whole novel on a screen. I just don't like it at all. I don't get as much out of it. That's, scientifically proven as well. If you're reading on the screen, you don't get as much. And if you're writing on the screen, you really don't get as much, which is why note-taking on the laptops is so bad. Because if you're writing on paper or on a clay tablet, as used to be the case in ancient Greek times, you're literally forging the letters, in the physical space, like you are making them.
Yeah.
If you're just...
You can type something without even looking at it. Like, you don't see the words, nothing.
I mean, you can write without looking at it again, but...
Yeah, I guess. It's...
I know what you mean.
You're still moving your hands in the shape of the letters.
So do we have any ideas for integrating technology in a way which is better? Because I'll preface it by saying I have few ideas, but I know that creativity is required, and probably people smarter than me can cook something up.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, classrooms need to be just reworked. Maybe using the German model of having different avenues. Not that one is better than the other, because that's kind of the only options we have here in Canada. It's either you just go like mainstream, or there's like university level, or there's like 100% hands-on. But there's like a very obvious hierarchy there. But in Germany, there's just no hierarchy. So no one would feel bad about choosing a stream, basically. So just reworking the classrooms. Teachers are insanely overworked trying to create a curriculum basically for 30 different students.
Yeah, it should be more personalized, and for that we need more teachers and more money and infrastructure and all that.
Yeah.
But I mean about actual technology. What can we do? Because every semester pretty much, there'll be one course which requires us to pay for what high school kids know as Kahoot, which is just a free website where you play with your smartphone from your desk. The teacher has inputted multiple choice questions and you can respond. So it's basically like a quiz in class where you can see everyone's responses.
$200 for it or something.
Since we're university students, it's a paid version, which is identical.
Mm-hmm.
But
I would say,
that again seems to me like a pretty lazy integration.
Yeah. One good integration that I could see is not using it to not submitting your papers via the cloud or whatever, but using it to bring experiences to students that they can't actually have. Doing a virtual tour of the Louvre or something, or like showing them paintings as inspiration that you don't have access to otherwise. Yeah.
No, I like just having a big screen. That's itself technology.
Mm-hmm.
We had, maybe 90s kids will remember, we had like a rickety old projector which was always rolled out. And you'd always be kind of excited when that happened. And it had these like laminated clear plastic sheets, usually with math questions on.
Yeah.
Do you remember those?
Yeah, but I, at the time, in grade 1...
It was called like the heads up or something.
Yeah, it was called the overhead.
The overhead, yeah.
Yeah, because they used to be suspended from the roof, but then they have...
Then they rolled them out, so I don't know why it's called the overhead.
My 8-year-old self was thinking, why can't you just write this equation on the board and answer it? And I would get really frustrated when they would smudge the markers that they were writing on with. Like, really frustrated. And I was just like, just write it on the chalkboard. Like, I was really upset with them. I don't personally think that's a good way to integrate technology.
You don't think a big screen could be helpful?
I think a screen could be helpful.
Yeah, so that's itself
Not the
technology.
overhead.
I don't know whether it's a projector, whether it's a smart board, whether it's an actual TV screen, but, you know, big footage seems beneficial.
Footage is a good, yeah. Show kids movies. Don't show them The Incredibles in French. Although we do love The Incredibles.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Show them cinema. Show the kids the ancient texts. I don't know. I just think bringing in things.
No, I meant what you were saying about paintings. Just yeah. I mean, just on a really basic catch-all level. With a big screen, you can show things in a big way so that everyone in the room can see it.
Yeah.
Whatever it may be.
Show the kids space.
In my grade 6, we did a virtual tour of the Taj Mahal, which might be interesting, but might also intrude on what I would say is the principle of don't travel until you've traveled. You know, try not to learn too much about other places because living virtually like that is not good. So, I mean, you know, who knows? But
I think art.
Things like that.
Yeah.
And art is a good point because, well, let's say ruins. Okay, well, here's a great example, and I loved this. I took an ancient and medieval theatre class last year. Yeah. Probably my favourite course that I've taken in university. You remember how excited I was?
Yeah, you were acting out scenes from the class.
It was really fun. And it helped that I had my favourite professor. He was very enthusiastic, incredibly knowledgeable, and did out-of-the-box things like this. For our class on Athens and Athenian theatre, learning about the actual layout of the city and especially of the theatres and where the actors were, where the chorus was, things like that, the stage layout. He had, of course, his laptop hooked up to the screen in the lecture hall, and he brought in his copy of Assassin's Creed Origins, which was the Assassin's Creed game set in ancient Greece, which has, credit to Ubisoft, a really well scaled and, you know, for a video game, historically accurate version of Athens. And he just walked us around it, and it was very helpful for visualizing. Like that could have not been done in any other time period in history. So that's something like should be celebrated and applauded, and I thought it was a great integration. So things like that.
But it takes extreme creativity.
Yeah, you've got to think outside the box.
Yeah, I don't like slideshows.
No?
Just hand out notes to the kids.
Well, another thing that's good about technology is that it reduces the use of paper.
Yeah.
I would rather a big slideshow on the walls than everyone following along on their laptop or phone, I'll say that.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I guess slideshows are okay if the kids are taking notes, but when they're following along in their slideshows and they're not taking notes, a bit weird to me.
Basically, I don't think I'll have the creativity to revamp the education system on this episode. Maybe some other episode
that's true.
We'll patch it together.
Yeah.
But if we have good examples like this, do you have any good examples of times that professors have used technology in an interesting way, a helpful way, and a way which you think could not have been done through any other less technological means?
Give me a second to think about that.
Okay. I think not just integrating technology in the classroom, but outside the classroom is probably the biggest challenge and opportunity which faces educators.
Yeah.
We're in a time where objectively kids should be the most educated ever.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to me the case. But they really can be, and I'm hopeful that we'll figure it out, and they will be.
I think bringing back books, the entire time I was just thinking, this isn't challenging. This isn't teaching me any, it didn't make me... No, it was just filling your minds, it wasn't teaching you to think. Particularly grade 10 and grade 9. We were reading a lot of books, which I was really excited about. We read The Merchant of Venice, Midsummer Night's Dream. What's the one with the boys on the island? Lord of the Flies. Just a lot of classics, and I was so excited, and I read every single one of them. Basically, I got the reading list, read them all in a month. But then, the end of the semester came, and the teacher was just no one wanted to read the books, so we're just going to watch the movies, and that just made me so mad.
This is the other big thing I wanted to talk about, is critical thinking, and I think it comes down to this. There should be a balance of, what I'm going to lump into these three categories. I know a lot of people lump them into two. STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math. Arts, meaning actual creativity, painting, writing, music, theatre, and the humanities. So like social studies, history, civics, learning about government, philosophy, things like that. And I think critical thinking and what you were just describing or bemoaning the lack of comes exclusively as a function of the humanities and art. I would say mostly the humanities. And that's what I really think schools do not teach us at all. It's so lopsided towards STEM. It's crazy.
Yeah,
I know
even
because
then we're not learning about technology in a good way.
I know because they are trying to create students who can go on to code and do computer science and further automate the world, blah, 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 which is obviously not what we want anyway. But STEM, when you think about it, there's pretty much no way to learn it in a way which provokes critical thinking. The only way to really learn it is just to be told it. You can't discover numbers by yourself.
Yeah.
You know, you can be kind of taught some rules and then figure out equations, and that has its own merits, which I enjoy, and that's why I used to like math, because there was a bit of imagination to it. But mostly your critical thinking will come from learning the humanities, and that's what, as you described, we don't learn at all. And when we do learn it, I find it's some kind of pseudo-historical, localized version of history.
Yeah. It's not a comprehensive history.
No, it's
it
just
doesn't
about...
talk about, like, I didn't learn about Greece or philosophy, really.
Forget about Greece or philosophy. We barely went before World War One, and that's not to say that we covered World War One, you know, in any in-depth way, because we didn't.
True.
So these are like, you know, you could argue that World War One and Two are the two of the biggest events in history.
Yeah.
And we didn't, like, we barely covered them.
That's a really good point.
And those are by far the two historical events which we covered the most that aren't Canada-centric. So the humanities. I think that's key. I think there should be much more of a balance between STEM, arts, and the humanities. STEM because it's good for people to be competent and to know math and to know the technology that they're using, and especially where it comes from. Things like energy, STEM, you know, engineering will be key to solving sustainable problems. Yeah. We know this. But I really think if we had a more humanities, well-versed populace, we would really avoid so many of the issues which society seems to be falling into with regards to politics especially. And maybe if we had a more, I don't know, this is my own kind of romantic thought, but if we had a more artistic populace, or at least one which had been afforded the opportunity to explore that side of themselves, I just think people would genuinely be happier.
100%.
Because there's no, and this is, I guess this could fall into the question of uncertainty as to where should this be taught, at home or in school. But in school, well, one, it's kind of more democratic because everyone has access to the same paints and pencils and papers in school, whereas at home it's like those things are expensive, so not everybody has those. Yeah. So just giving kids a chance to do that, I also think would really increase their enjoyment of school, because I don't know if this is the case around the world, but in North America, pretty much every student will just say school's like a prison. Like, everybody hates it.
Especially artistic students, they're just like, this is not for me, basically.
Yeah, and you know, like, that's not irrelevant, the fact that kids hate school. We kind of take that for granted, but I don't think we should.
I don't think so.
It's never going to be everyone's favorite thing.
No, and as we were saying, it should include an element of challenge and making kids do stuff they don't want to.
But I really don't think it should be as hated as it is here. Like, I despise school, and I mean that pretty much every minute of it from maybe grade 8 onwards. Yeah. I was hoping I wasn't there. Like, I dreaded it every single day, and it wasn't anything to do with the content being challenging or anything like that. It was the entire system and the structure and the establishment I consider to be just very oppressive.
Yeah. So I was thinking today about, like, the times I'm focusing mainly on high school because university is a whole different bag of fish, but there were a few courses and a few elements of my high school career which I really enjoyed. One was my yoga class, where we got to move and discuss ancient things, learn about mindfulness. It was just like, it changed my life, basically. I took that in grade 10. And then grade 11 and 12 I did IB, which integrated community work, but not just doing community work. It was community activity and creativity, 3 things which I had done an insane amount of my entire life. But this enabled me, they did a reflection piece on all of those activities, which I thought was really valuable and should be a part of school from first year. And finally, my geography and philosophy courses, mainly my philosophy one, which made you think about learning. I feel like that should be integrated throughout, just like how we know what we know, how the brain works, stuff like that.
Humanities.
Yeah, but it just wasn't even, like I didn't even know to go learn about those things on my own. It wasn't suggested to me to think about why I'm learning, think about how I can apply these things to my own life and to the world. I don't know. I just think those things should be more integrated, and we should do more things like yoga.
Critical thinking.
Yeah.
Awareness, mindfulness, being aware of why you were there, because teachers, that's another thing which I don't think is irrelevant. The kind of age-old, eternal problem facing students is, why do I have to learn this? Why do I have to learn calculus or whatever it is?
Mm-hmm.
We probably won't go into the specifics of curriculums today. That's for another class, another episode. So the age-old question is, why am I here at school?
Yeah.
What's the point? And teachers just never bother to answer it or even attempt to.
Yeah, it's always, you'll need this in middle school, you need this in high school.
But that should be an official part of the curriculum.
Of course.
Is being able to ask the right questions, learning how to think about things, being provided with the proper context and knowledge of psychology, history, philosophy, so that students can start to answer that question for themselves, because it's actually pretty meta and deep. What am I doing here? Why am I getting this education? It's not a simple question.
No.
And they should be learning about that the whole way through. That's what your theory of knowledge was about, right?
Yes.
In IB.
Yeah. And I think enabling...
But that didn't start until high school.
Grade 11, yeah.
So that should be from the beginning.
For sure.
In a really basic way.
Yeah. In Europe, there's a lot of IB schools that go from grade primary, and they do that, which is cool. But it just needs to be integrated everywhere. It just makes sense to say, this is why you're here.
Otherwise, I really think you're just ostracizing kids where you don't have to be.
Yeah.
Because it's also the most volatile time of your life where you're questioning everything. Let's say you're turning 12. You're not going to know why you're there. And school doesn't even bother to try and catch those kids who might be kind of predisposed to disillusionment with such an establishment. Yeah.
I think it also needs to really, if a kid's really inclined or predisposed to something, don't categorize them, or what's the word for that?
Sequester them.
Yeah, don't say like, oh, you're really good at art, you're an art kid.
Silo them.
Just try and find ways that you can make math artistic. And another thing that I was thinking while you were talking earlier is you were saying the 3 categories, and I think an important part of art and then STEM is you can be really good at STEM, but you need to know how to package it in an artistic way, how to make movies about it, how to get it to the people.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
Because for all the creativity there is in the world, probably less than 1% of it is properly monetized.
Yeah, for sure.
We're sounding like kind of good little capitalists here, but it's not really about capitalism, it's about being well-rounded.
And doing things that you enjoy, I think.
So here's something else I wanted to say about being well-rounded, because I was looking into the Greek system of education, which you kind of skipped over or skimmed past in your very brief timeline at the beginning.
Yeah.
In ancient Greece, school started around age 6. It was mostly gendered, meaning it was mostly males. Some of the things they wanted to do were read and write, play a musical instrument, usually the harp or the lyre. They learnt the poetry of Homer and Hesiod and those kind of epics, which were really highly regarded and were often incorporated into lessons, and also in ways of memorization and recital for the students.
Oh, yeah.
How to debate and give a persuasive speech. So I guess you'd call that rhetoric, which we don't even bother with today.
No.
And they studied science and math on top of that. So it was, I think, super ahead of its time, except for Sparta, which was basically how to become a trained killer for the army.
Well, there's that, yeah.
And it was very well-rounded. We'd call it today like a Renaissance person, but that's really what kids should be from the start.
Yeah, for sure.
Instead of being so heavily skewed into math.
Yeah.
In a way which really doesn't benefit kids learning math, because they get it so much that they don't like it.
Yeah.
That's most of the reason why most kids don't like math, is because they have to do it so much. It's why they usually fall off and stop caring about it so early.
Yeah, even if they enjoyed it at first and thought it was fun, I always did, but now I'm just kind of like, it was all I did for most of my education. That's really well-rounded kids. That's very important. And also memorization and rhetoric is something that isn't taught anymore, and technology just completely strips away.
I have a great
Spell
quote
check.
on
Give me the
memorization.
quote. Amazing.
And this is also about general competence. It's by Socrates, of course, who famously really hated writing
Yes.
and the written word. This was all his teachings written down by Plato, so make of that what you will.
Shout out to Plato. Come on the podcast.
If men learn this, it will implant forgetfulness in their souls. They will cease to exercise memory because they rely on that which is written, calling things to remembrance no longer from within themselves, but by means of external marks. What you have discovered is a recipe not for memory, but for reminder. And it is no true wisdom that you offer your disciples, but only its semblance. For by telling them of many things without teaching them, you will make them seem to know much, while for the most part they know nothing. And as men filled, not with wisdom, but with the conceit of wisdom, they will be a burden to their fellows.
That's a very good description
So
of
he
modern
was
education, and that was
2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
He was talking about writing, but as I've said before on the podcast, the internet and its extensive documentation and our extensive dependence on it is just what he was worried about times 1,000. So basically everything he said was true, because they used to recite epic poems. That used to be the means of transferring those stories.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, we don't.
No.
And no one can remember like a 100-line poem if someone asks them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people would really, really struggle with that. But not even memory, because again, we've talked about that before, but just the idea of competence. This is what teachers were saying with calculators, you know, in elementary.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be like, well, why do I need to learn this math? I can just use a calculator. And teachers would say, but you won't always have a calculator on you. And now we say, haha, but we do always have a calculator on us. And then the teachers, if they're smart, will say, but you shouldn't use it all the time or else you forget how to do the math, which is exactly what happened with me, happens with everybody. Mm-hmm. Similarly with spell check, as you were saying, you know, people won't bother to learn how to spell properly.
Yeah. And it's like, well, if you don't need to, why do it? It's literally just good for your brain. Like
It's competence.
It's competence, yeah.
We just watched Wall-E the other day. Why would you want to be incompetent?
You wouldn't.
That's not so mean.
No, but I mean, it's just like, it's not being able to do math. That's not the thing. But it's being able to think critically about a situation, to be able to make choices about jobs, about how you're going to change the world, how you're going to be happy. You need to know you need to have these skills, which aren't...
I think it is competence.
Yeah.
But it's just a generalized... Think about if you were lost in the woods without your phone. Many years ago, you would have been able to make your way around.
Yeah, you'd know what the stars meant.
You would have known the stars, you would have known maybe some wildlife, you would have known some plants. And now I really feel like we know nothing because we can just reference our phone all the time.
Yeah.
It's a very unhealthy dependence for the sake of actual education. It's exactly what Socrates was saying. You can tell people all the things, but you're not teaching them. And that's what the internet does. It tells us, but it does not teach us.
We have a tendency to skim things, and then it translates into all areas of life. You don't listen. You're not an active listener. You're not an active reader. You're just always kind of skimming.
You forget things quicker. You know, I think modern people have much worse memories. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I feel like education used to also promote a relationship to nature and others. And it just doesn't really do that anymore. And it's mainly due to technology, and just the classroom, I think, is an outdated setting for learning.
This is something I wanted to mention when we were talking about, again, the separation of where to learn things. Mm-hmm. Because the two things I had in mind were nuts and bolts, society-based kind of ways of getting around, taxes, mortgages, car payments, cooking, things like that. That was one area which I was unsure about where should be taught. And the other one being ethics, both sustainable ethics, as I mentioned that I had got into a conversation with someone in my class about, and just general ethics. I was like, should they be teaching morals in class? And my basic conclusion was no.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That should be done elsewhere and reinforced at school through socialization.
Yeah, but there's some things which I feel like are universal. An appreciation for nature. There's no culture that says you shouldn't appreciate nature.
So you mean it should be taught in school?
Yeah.
I'd agree with that. It should be taught, but I just think school should be everything academic. It should be taught by learning about trees or learning about nature and things like that. But I just don't think the teachers should be reading The Tortoise and the Hare to the kids and any environmental version of that. You know what I mean?
Fair. I feel like exposing kids to experiences is the thing I'm trying to get at. Letting them make...
Yeah, of course. Making them experience from the start.
Yeah, and allow them to formulate their own judgment on what's valuable, what's good, what's right, just from experience. Not from saying it directly to them, just by saying, look at this, what's good, what's right.
That's what I mean. You shouldn't tell kids about how sustainability is a virtue. It should be shown both through activities, educational ones, but also through case studies and just learning about ecosystems.
Yeah, just facts.
Like your ethics should come from that kind of pragmatic, scientific view of the world. They're not separate, but I just think for the sake of teaching kids, they should be separate. Yeah.
Cool. You're all good? I had one quote maybe we could read to finish us off.
Yeah, take us home.
This is a quote by John W. Gardner, who was the Minister of Education in the States. It says, "Much education today is monumentally ineffective. All too often, we are giving young people cut flowers when we should be teaching them to grow their own plants."
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Ethically and academically. Guys, if you like this episode, you can check out our other the rest of our Modern Times series on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Again, that consists of Conspiracies, The Rise of the Far Right, and Modern Art. Or if you're interested in any other topics or us tackling different subjects through this lens of a critique of modernity, you can find various other topics that we've covered on those pages as well. We also post graphic design content, some science-based media, and some behind-the-scenes videos on our Instagram at @the_environmental.
So yeah, hope everyone enjoyed this and have a great
day.